Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. How are U.S. tariffs on Brazilian goods reshaping the global ag market? Joining us to share his perspective on the situation is Matt Simpson, CEO of Brazil Potash. Welcome, Matt. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me on, Sarah.
So let's start with a look at how the tariffs are reshaping the markets. The U.S. recently imposed 50% tariffs on Brazilian goods. And so give us kind of an overview, if you would, on how tariffs are taking a little bit of a toll on perhaps agriculture trade flows from a global perspective.
So the tariffs have definitely reshaped the trade between Brazil and China and the U.S. and China in particular. Brazil has always been one of the largest net exporters of agricultural goods to the country. The country exports about 167 billion a year in total, with China being the main buyer of several goods, such as soybean in particular. And the United States is also a big exporter. And with the tariffs in place, what we've seen is a behavior where countries, especially like China, have reduced their purchases from the United States agricultural market to the benefit of Brazil.
So now, beyond the immediate trade impacts, what are you seeing in terms of input costs for farmers and potential knock-on effects on food prices?
The price of fertilizer in particular has been quite volatile, and it is sensitive to these political dynamics. We started the year off with potash at lows of around $280 a ton, and that was largely because of Belarus, which is the second to third largest producer in the world, literally dumping potash in order to get US dollars to pay for trade surplus, only to then really slow down and see prices start to come back up. Potash today sitting at around $365 a ton, but there is quite a bit of concern, especially with the threats that President Trump is now saying for countries that purchase goods from Russia. And the reason that's so concerning, sir, is that Russia does export about 30% of the world's fertilizer supply, and Brazil in particular is a large importer.
So now China's already been pivoting towards Brazilian soy and other commodities. Have these tariffs accelerated that shift, and what might that mean for Brazil's role in global agriculture?
They very much have accelerated the purchasing of goods produced in Brazil. What we're really seeing is this shift, as I mentioned a bit earlier on, where it's impacting the United States farmers quite dramatically, and it's benefiting Brazil because Brazil is a country that has amongst the highest amount of land suitable to grow food. It has the highest amount of fresh water and a climate where you can grow 3 crops a year. You never stop growing in Brazil.
Now, Brazil currently imports like 95% of its potash, and so that must create possibly some vulnerabilities when it comes to trade tensions. Do you continue to see tensions escalating, or what's your insight on that?
You're right. Brazil is very exposed because it imports about 85% of its fertilizer in total, of which, as you stated, over 95% of its potash, when it has potentially the second biggest basin in the world sitting in its backyard. So that's really where Brazil Potash comes into play, is that we're going to produce potash domestically in Brazil and really take out that geopolitical risk.
So you're really reducing the dependency then of the and helping to provide farmers with a more stable supply when you're looking at the overall picture. Is that correct?
Oh, very much so. I mean, when we look at the potash sector and specifically, you have 3 of the top 5 producers, being Russia, Belarus, and Israel, are countries that are sanctioned or at war. So this leads not only Brazil, but the world to be very exposed to these geopolitical events.
So walk us through the current process and progress that you have on your autonomous project and what kind of impact that could have on the Brazilian fertilizer security once that's all in operation.
So our potash project in Brazil is fully permitted for construction. There's 21 licenses that were issued after having completed all the technical work, our environmental and social reports, and public hearings, plus indigenous consultations. So the project, once up and running, will produce about 2.4 million tons a year. Brazil today consumes about 14 million tons, so it'll be about 17% of Brazil's need. But this basin is absolutely massive in Brazil, such that we could look to double, possibly triple, and even quadruple the output over time.
That's significant for sure. So then if we look at the big picture, we have a tariffs and the supply chain and the strains on the supply chain. If those collide with the ongoing fertilizer shortages, what would you say would be kind of your forward-looking insight when it comes to the impact that might have on the global food security?
Well, right now we have three countries, being Canada, Russia, and Belarus, that supply roughly 80% of the world's potash. So we're very exposed. Again, when you look at, especially Russia and arguably Belarus are kind of one and the same. So you really only have two major suppliers in the world. So these tariffs that could happen against Russia and possibly also fall in effect into Belarus, or even if one day President Putin woke up and decided not to supply fertilizer, he could really, really impact global food supply and security. So having another major supplier of potash, and in this case coming out of Brazil, is going to be quite meaningful for global food security, because this product, although largely destined for the Brazilian market, could also be a very viable alternative for other markets like the United States, should they need an alternate supply.
So what would you say, what policy measures, either in Brazil or from trading partners, could help really to stabilize the fertilizer access and protect farmers in this environment?
Well, again, I think having production domestically right where it's being consumed beside the farmers is your best protection. It protects you not only from the geopolitical risks that we've been speaking about, but also we've seen in recent years port strikes, rail strikes, and this also has a very, very big knock-on effect. So by having the product very close to the farmers, and in our case, using a backhaul river transportation, you mitigate all of these different risks to ensure that the farmers have the critical nutrients that they need to grow food efficiently.
Any final thoughts to leave our audience with here today, Matt?
I think the most important thing is that we're moving to a world of protectionism in some ways, and that there's certain goods and services that are absolutely essential. And what more important than being able to grow food to feed your people? And if you have the capability of producing some of the key inputs, in this case, potash, to grow your food domestically, I think it's absolutely essential that you do.
Very good. Matt Simpson, CEO of Brazil Potash. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you very much for having me on again.
Likewise, we appreciate all of you in the audience tuning in. Until next time, for Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.